Hi guys, this is the lesson for Module 1, Lesson 20 for November the 12th. Our focusing question, which we have been looking at for the past several lessons, is what sustained people's spirits during the Great Depression? Remember, sustain means to not give up. The content framing question is how does Hesse's use of symbolism, or what does Hesse's use of symbolism reveal about Ma's character? And the craft question, how do I use a two-seek paragraph to respond to the New Read assessment? All right, as our welcome activity, I want you to take a second to open up the tab for the M1L20, and we'll be referring back to that throughout the lesson. But I want you to you don't have to write these down, but I want you to just take a minute to think about them. How would you fill in these blanks? Billie Joe's love for playing piano is like a, or the blank because blank. The dust in the novel is like a blank because blank. I just want you to pause the video and just kind of think about some ideas of how you would fill in those blanks. All right, so in our launch section of our lesson, we're going to focus on the word symbolism. This should be reviewed from elementary school, but if not, I will teach you what this means. You'll be writing the definition soon on the M1L20 document, but it's not as complicated as you might think. You probably already have an understanding about it and may not realize it. But what does a wedding ring symbolize? The wedding ring symbolizes marriage, commitment. So that object, the wedding ring, is tangible, but it represents something that's intangible. Tangible means you can touch it, and it represents something that you can't touch. How would you define symbolism? I want you to pause the video, and I want you to think about how you would define symbolism and see if you can come up with another example of something that is symbolic. Symbolism is making an object represent an idea. And so when we look at Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty, we think of freedom. So I want you to write this definition on your M1L20 at the top. It'll have where you write the definition, the use of concrete symbols to represent abstract concepts in a figurative way. And I will show you what the paper looks like so you know where to put it. So right here, you're going to type in that definition. So if you have to pause the video so you can do that, that is fine. So I want you to think, what might dust symbolize so far in the novel? Dust is something tangible that you can touch, but it represents something that you can't touch, something intangible. Consider how the characters perceive the dust and how it functions so far in the story. Dust could symbolize hardship, poverty, end of dreams and hope, or even death. I want to read a few poems to you, and I want you to think about what sustains Ma's spirits during the Great Depression. What keeps her going based on these two poems? For example, here's a sentence starter. Blank helps Ma sustain her spirit during the Great Depression. Let's look at the first one, Not Too Much to Ask, on page 16. It says, we haven't had a good crop in 3 years, not since the bounty of 31, and we're all whittled down to the bones these days. Even Ma, with her new round belly. But still, when the committee came asking, Ma donated 3 jars of applesauce and some cured pork, and a feed sack nightie she'd sewn for our coming baby. So according to this poem, what sustains Ma's spirit during the Great Depression? What sustains her spirit is by being generous. She donates food and even feed sack nighties that she had sewn for their coming baby, page 16. By donating, Ma makes a statement that there are people worse off than they are, and she's appreciative of what she has, like her new round belly. Now let's look at Mr. Hardley's money handling, page 17 through 19. It says, it was Daddy's birthday and Ma decided to bake him a cake. There wasn't money enough for anything like a real present. Ma sent me to fetch the extras with 50 cents she'd been hiding away. Don't go to Joyce City, Billy, she said. You can get what we need down Hardley's store. I slipped the coins into my sweater pocket, the pocket without the hole, thinking about how many sheets of new music 50 cents would buy. Mr. Hardley glared when the Wonder Bread door banged shut behind me. He squinted as I creaked across the wooden floor. Mr. Hardley was in the habit of charging too much for his stale food, and he made bad change when he thought he could get away with it. I squinted back at him as I gave him Ma's order. Mr. Hardley's been worse than normal since his attic filled with dust and collapsed under the weight. He hired folks for the repairs and argued over every nail at every little minute. The whole place took shoveling for days before he could open again, and some stock was so bad it had to be thrown away. The stove clanked in the corner as Mr. Hardly filled Ma's order. I could smell apples, ground coffee, and peppermint. I sorted through the patterns on the feed bags. Sneezed dust blew my nose. When Mr. Hardly finished sacking my things, I paid the bill, and taking the list in my pocket along with the change, hurried home so Ma could bake the cake before Daddy came in. But after Ma emptied the sack, setting each packet out on the oilcloth, she counted her change, and I remembered with a sinking feeling that I hadn't kept an eye on Mr. Hardly's money handling. And Mr. Hardly had cheated again. Only this time he cheated himself, giving us 4 extra cents. So while Mom mixed a cake, I walked back to Mr. Hardly's store, back through the dust, back through the Wonder Bread door, and thinking about the secondhand music in a moldy box at the shop in Joyce City, music I could have for 2 cents a sheet, I placed Mr. Hardly's overpayment on the counter and turned to head back home. Mr. Hardly cleared his throat, and I wondered for a moment if he'd call me back to offer a piece of peppermint or pick me out an apple from the crate, but he didn't, and that's okay. Ma would have thrown a fit if I'd taken a gift from him. So what sustains Ma's spirit based on that poem? What sustains her spirit is by retaining her pride. She counts her change after Billy Joe gets home from the store and realizes he gave them 4 extra cents. She sends Billy Joe back with the money, and Billy Joe knows that Ma would have thrown a fit if I'd taken a gift from him in return. So Ma's pride helps her hold her head up high despite their poverty. She doesn't need 4 extra cents, and this makes her feel better. All right, apple blossoms. And as I read this poem to you, it's on page 43, I want you to see what does this poem convey or show about Ma and what she values. Apple blossoms, page 43. Ma's been nursing these 2 trees for as long as I can remember. In spite of the dust, in spite of the drought, because of Ma's stubborn care, these trees are thick with blossoms, delicate and pinky white. My eyes can't get enough of the sight of them. I stand under the trees and let the petals fall into my hair. A blizzard of sweet-smelling flowers dropped from the boughs of the 2 placed there in the front yard by Ma before I was born, that she and they might bring forth fruit into our home together. So what do you think? What do we learn about Ma from this poem and what she values? We see that she values hard work. She tends to her apple trees, believes they can survive in spite of the dust, in spite of the drought. And because of her stubborn care, the trees survive despite everything that that works against them. So the trees are a lot like Ma. Another thing is that Ma believes in finding ways to stay hopeful. She plants the trees so that she and they might bring forth fruit into their home together. The trees and the fruit they produce give her hope that all is not dust and darkness. So what seems to sustain her spirits? What keeps Ma from giving up in these poems? Well, the apples and their future fruit, the beauty of the trees, and her hard work and dedication. So what might the apple trees, which is a tangible object that can be touched, what might the apple trees symbolize? Remember, an object symbolizes an idea, which is something intangible or something you can't touch. They could symbolize hope, inner strength, and hard work. So tomorrow you will have a test. You'll be writing a 2-seat paragraph. That's what will be on your test. And it will be using the same topic sentence. You'll be writing a 2-seat using the same topic sentence that you used on your 19A handout. So that's the assignment for tomorrow. The assignment for today, if you go to Module 1, Lesson 20, you're going to read the poem Apples, which is on page 45, and you're going to answer these questions. You're going to answer, what does this poem show about Ma, what she values? And it's just like we did with Apple Blossoms. When I read that, you're doing answering the same questions. What do we learn about Ma? What's important to her? Number 2, what does this poem show about what sustains Billy Joe's spirit? What keeps Billy Joe going? And number 3, what might the apple blossom symbolize? Here's a bonus question. It's a hard question, and I want to see if you can do it. How do the apples function as a symbol and help develop Ma's character? That's a hard question. So that's going to be a bonus question. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to either Miss Maddox or to myself. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to help you.